I woke up at about 2 in the morning to a strange noise in the hallway, like something heavy being thrown on the floor. I rubbed my eyes, still groggy, thinking maybe Dad had come home late from work. The sound was unnerving, but not unfamiliar. I had grown used to Dad's late shifts, the odd sounds in the night when he was home. I called out, "Dad, who's there?" Silence. The uneasy stillness made my skin crawl. Then, the door to my room creaked open slowly, its hinges groaning. My heart raced as the gap widened. For a moment I was paralyzed, staring into the shadowy hallway beyond. My breath caught when I saw my younger brother, Tim, standing there with a ball in his hands. He wore the same pajamas he'd always worn, blue with little rocket ships. His hair was messy, and his lips were curled into a playful smile. "Let's play," he said softly, holding the ball up. I swallowed hard, confusion filling my mind. I glanced at my clock. "Tim, it's 2 in the morning. Go back to bed." But instead of listening, Tim giggled, his laugh low and strange, like something cold slipping down my spine. Then, just as suddenly as he'd appeared, he turned and walked back into the hallway. The ball bouncing softly against the wooden floor, I sighed and lay back down, rubbing my eyes. Sleep tugged at me, but something gnawed at the edge of my thoughts. As I stared up at the ceiling, my mind began to clear, and with a sinking dread, it hit me. Tim wasn't supposed to be here. My brother had died 3 days ago. I sat up quickly, heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The room felt colder now, a chilling draft slipping through the cracked door. My hands trembled and a sharp knot of fear twisted in my stomach. I wanted to call for my parents, but fear kept me frozen. What would they say if they found me? Worse, what would I see if I opened that door? Would Tim still be there? Would he still have that same smile? I didn't dare move, not even to blink. The minutes dragged by, each one heavier than the last. The ball bounced, the footsteps shuffled, the laughter lingered. I waited, heart hammering, until finally the first light of dawn began to break through the window. The sounds stopped. I let out a shaky breath, tears stinging my eyes. When I finally gathered the courage to open the door, the hallway was empty. The ball lay in the middle of the floor, still and silent. But Tim was gone, or at least I thought he was. I'm an 18-year-old guy, a student living on my own, and I want to share a story that happened to me this summer. Whenever I think about it, chill runs down my spine. It was the middle of July, a hot summer evening, but outside it had already cooled down. I was chatting with a friend on social media while watching YouTube videos. I had a few freshly made sandwiches at hand. My chat was blowing up with messages, and my favorite blogger's video was playing on the screen. The only thing missing to complete the cozy atmosphere was a cup of tea. So after telling my friend I'd be gone for a few minutes, I headed to the kitchen. I set the kettle to boil and stared out the window. It was already dark and quiet outside, with no one around. After a few minutes, the kettle whistled. I made myself some tea, added a few sugar cubes, and left it on the windowsill to cool down. I didn't feel like going back to my stuffy room, so I decided to wait while the tea cooled and enjoy the view of the deserted streets of Minnesota. A couple of minutes later, I saw a strange, tall man below. He must have been about 2 meters tall. He was bald, wearing a white shirt with red stains on the collar, a big old belt, and wide pants. He was walking slowly, whistling a strange tune, then stopped and stared into the windows of the first floor of my building. I live on the second. I admit I felt a bit creeped out. He seemed so odd. Why would anyone be staring into strangers' windows in the middle of the night? I didn't want to watch any longer, so I grabbed my not yet cooled tea and hurried back to my room. By the time I got back, there were over 20 messages from my friend, all asking, "Where have you been?" I quickly told him about the strange guy. Naturally, he didn't believe me, though he asked me to take a picture. I refused, saying the man had already left. In truth, I didn't want to see him again. We soon moved on to other hot topics, and the strange man was forgotten. By now it was pitch dark outside, and the clock read 12:42 a.m. But I wasn't ready to leave the internet. Just like my friend, who had just informed me he was going to take a shower and then go to bed since he had to get up early for a job interview. Sitting alone was much less fun, but since I wasn't tired, I decided to watch some more YouTube videos. I hadn't even finished a 15-minute video when I got a message from my friend. Dude, you won't believe what I just saw. So I turned on the water to fill the bathtub, and while it was running, I went to the kitchen. It was hot, so I opened the window and stared outside. Suddenly I see this guy. He looks normal, but there's something off about him. Can't explain what. He's walking and humming some weird song. Then he stops near my building and starts staring into the first floor windows. He stands there for about 5 minutes, and then looks up at the second floor. I thought maybe he's waiting for a friend or something, but then he looked straight at my window, right at me. He stopped humming, and this creepy grin appeared on his face. Gave me chills, I swear. Then he screamed. It wasn't a human scream. His face seemed to change, like it got darker, but maybe that was just me. He screamed so loud. Then I felt something wet. Damn bathtub overflowed. I went to turn it off, and when I came back to the kitchen, he was gone. Do you think I imagined it? Sounds like the same guy I told you about. You didn't believe me. Maybe you should drink less, then you won't see things. Although he did seem weird to me too, but let's be realistic. He's probably just some drunk guy, wandering around looking for someone to take him in. Friend, no, it didn't seem like that. Wait, someone's knocking on my door. Weird, who could that be at this hour? I'll go check and message you after, then off to the bath. Me. Okay, I kept watching my video, not realizing that 40 minutes had passed since his last message. It didn't bother me much at the time. I figured maybe the neighbors had come over, or he'd overflowed the bathtub again and forgot to message me. No bad thoughts crossed my mind, so I stayed online a bit longer and then went to bed a couple of hours later. After all, I had school the next day. The next day went by quickly. I thought about stopping by my friend's place. He lives right across from me. But then I remembered he was out for the job interview, so he probably wasn't home. I didn't call him, not wanting to bother him. By evening, he still hadn't appeared online, even though he was supposed to be back by 5 p.m. I started to worry a little, but I calmed myself, thinking maybe he went to his girlfriend's place. Who knows? It was around 11:53 p.m. when I went to the kitchen, feeling really thirsty. As I poured myself a glass of cold water, I glanced out the window. And there he was again, the same man, in the same clothes, with the same song, the same slow steps, stopping at the same spot near my building and staring at the first floor windows. I started trembling. But then, he looked straight at me, right into my eyes. A wicked grin spread across his face, so sinister I almost choked on my water. Then his mouth opened wide, impossibly wide, and he screamed. That scream was terrifying, wild, loud, and furious. My God, I've never heard anything more horrifying. For a moment, I thought his face had turned black, like a shadow, and his skin sagged down to his shoulders, making his head look like a black oval. I dropped my glass and ran to my room, shaking. 15 minutes passed before I could calm down. I was about to go to bed when there was a loud knock at the door. It was forceful, like someone was trying to break it down. I froze, terrified to move. The knocking continued for half an hour, then suddenly stopped. I must have blacked out because I woke up the next day, remembering nothing. Maybe that was for the best. A few days later, the memory of that night started to fade, and I convinced myself I had imagined it all. I was exhausted, worn out, and that's why it seemed so real. That's what I thought until I found out about my friend's death. A terrible death, one I didn't want to believe. He was found hanging in his kitchen, right by the window. His head had been carefully shaved bald, as if by a professional barber. His shirt, the one he had worn for the job interview, had drops of blood on the collar from his slit throat. His mother, with whom I had a good relationship, told me all of this. As soon as I heard about his death, I knew who was responsible. Was he a maniac? Was he some otherworldly being in human form? I don't know. But ever since that day, I never look out my windows at night, and I always keep them covered. Rest in peace, Max.